First of all, you can manipulate movies and you can do special effects because time is breakable down into 24 pictures a second.
I was just always interested in very bizarre things as a kid. I really liked monster movies and I was very creative.
Cut that.
In other words, there are 24 still photographs a second when projected in rapid succession gives the illusion of motion.
I started out by just cutting up old wigs and gluing them onto people's faces and making werewolves at Halloween, that type of thing.
And so that's why we've been able to trick the audience up till the digital age. Now we're able to take each one of those pictures and break it down into pixel points. So we have addressable picture points that are, of course there's millions of them. And so we now have absolute control, theoretically, of the image.
I hooked up with the right people at the right time when this was actually just beginning and blossoming as an industry. At this point, it's pretty well flooded, and with the advent of CGI, it would be very difficult to start a studio now.
It's going to take us some decades to figure out how to sort of maximize this. I mean, it's basically kind of the sky's the limit.
So let's proceed mark and reflection.
Leave the window just a little way, that's getting a little staticky.
Steve Johnson and Efects took the designs that Giger had created and started building the creature, and that was another whole process of evolution.
H.R. Giger is a really interpretive painter. He's very used to working in two dimensions. He does sculpt, but he's most known for his paintings. And I think what makes Giger's work look like Giger's work is it's got a certain looseness. It's very fluid and very rough. He gets his raw motion right there into the canvas.
We had to continually refine because his work, by its very nature of being an airbrush, is not as specific as line drawings would be, and so on and so forth.
So when you're asked to bring one of his creations into 3 dimensions, you've got to suddenly take the physical world into account, which becomes fairly difficult because God knows what goes on in his mind to come up with these ideas. But more often than not, you bring them into a physical world, and unless you've also taken a very loose, fluid approach to it, I don't think it necessarily looks like Giger.
So a big part of our work was to try and take some of those shaded areas and give them line and give them function and give them form, so that in 3 dimensions the character had the elegance and grace that it did on the flat piece of paper.
In broad strokes, we're creating Syl, actually, a full physical version of it. We've got different versions for different reasons.
Steve Johnson is constantly coming up with new ideas and ways to make things better and a way to make things different, and I'm sure well into post-production he's going to be coming up with notions as to how to sort of smooth this out a little bit more and make this line a little cleaner.
Probably our most involved sequence, which actually is the most complicated sequence I've ever designed, is going to happen right here on this set. It's the actual lab creature scene.
So we can we'll go for a take, guys.
What we've got in this sequence are probably, we're using every trick in the book, we've probably got 20 different puppets to actually create a 2-minute scene, so I think it's going to be pretty damn outstanding. It's just one shot after another. In every shot we're using a different trick. We're using gravity tricks, different puppets, opticals, all kinds of things like that to really make this an incredible scene, and I'm really excited about it and nervous.
When you take on a movie like this, you never really know what you're going to end up with, because the truth of the matter is that an inordinate amount of the movie is out of your hands. Normally you finish photography and you have a pretty good sense of the movie that you have, and while you go through a journey of discovery through the editing process, you basically have all the elements of the film that you need to put together to make a film. The nature of this movie is other than that. We will basically be in production all the way through to the very end of the movie, because there are going to be computer-generated images that are being continually processed and developed all the way through our post-production. So the movie will continue to evolve in a more exaggerated way than it otherwise would.
Well, I remember, back in the early 80s, discovering with my first computer when it was, I remember I paid about $3,500 for it. It was 2 floppy drives, and when I discovered that you could push the words apart and type a whole new sentence in without having to start again, it just overwhelmed me, and I was sold on computers from then on. What I do remember is that this was really one of the very first films where motion capture was used. And it was the very early days of motion capture, and of course, they were writing the software for doing it as we were trying to create this creature.
Essentially, we're sort of visually partnered with the prosthetics and makeup effects team headed by Steve Johnson.
It's my first outing with such heavy CGI. I mean, I've worked with CGI quite a bit. In this case, we're creating the physical end, they're creating the CGI end, so we've had to work very, very closely together, because what we're making, they're making, and vice versa. So it's all got to, the movement points have got to be plotted much further in advance than we normally would. We've got to take a lot of things into account where we normally would do final touches days or even the morning of locking something down and shooting it. This will really affect the CGI models of this, so we have to be much more specific. There is a scene where she's kissing one of her potential victims, but as the camera dollies back, we see this barbed tongue shoot out of the back of his head and then come back in. So what we're doing is we're creating a physical back of a headpiece with a mechanical tongue that'll shoot out with the blood squirting. What Boss Film is doing is then mapping that piece onto the real actor's head and blending it around all the way through. It's going to be what really brings this thing to life, because we can never go beyond close shots, waist-up shots, shots in water, laying down shots. We can't actually make this thing get up and do backflips and jump on the ceiling, and they can. So it's truly another tool that's going to make this thing really, really have the punch that people will really remember, I think. So that's been really exciting.
Well, the basic thing is that we're creating a Giger-esque creature, who's the title character, kind of, who is transparent and translucent and is a completely different look, which couldn't have been done a year ago or 2 years ago, owing to the technology that's available to us now. However, it's a matter of time and money. So, I mean, it's not inexpensive to do what we're talking about doing, which is generating the entire creature in the computer, utilizing a new form of puppeteering called motion capture, where we have an electronic armature that puppeteers operate, and the director can actually direct the motions of the full-size looking creature that's matted into the background, so that when he's looking at the scene, it kind of looks like it's going to ultimately look, so it becomes directable.
It was very difficult. It was very, cutting-edge stuff, and some days were very frustrating, both for myself and for the people involved. And then other days, you'd go like, this is just, you saw the future. And I think it is, one of the most interesting things about this film is that it is one of the very early films where motion capture was used.
It's quite an incredible breakthrough, this motion capture world that we're in. In the old days, we would be shooting a puppet that would look like what we want it to look like in front of a blue screen, and the puppeteers would all have to try to stay out of the way of the camera and all these kind of things. In this case, we have a virtual camera that's placed in space wherever you want to place it, and the puppeteers can get in front of it because it doesn't see them. It only sees the calculations that are being affected by the elbows and wrists and pelvis and knees, which are all traveling up and down these wires and ultimately winding up on the screen with about 1/5 of a second delay. This instrument gives the director the ability to come in here, look at a monitor, talk to the puppeteers, discuss how he wants the action to develop during the shot, give the director the sense of serendipity, action, and all the things that develop in the case of a director operating with actors. The creature actually starts out as a three-dimensional sculpture, which is then digitized and put into a data bank. And the armature itself is designed sort of like a Tinker Toy set, because you can reconfigure the skeleton to a different shaped creature. I mean, in this case, it's a creature that has very long legs, for instance. We can then increase the length of the shin and the thighs by just basically taking shafts out I mean, mechanically. Then, of course, in the computer, it all has to be then, it has to coincide.
Well, anything at all you can make it to contribute to making it look more angry and aggressive, the better it's going to be.
What about the from?
It's changing incredibly fast every day. I mean, the director of Species, for instance, was dismayed that some of the action that he had directed for the show maybe didn't have something that came up towards the end of production. In other words, it's something that is developing so quickly that during the production itself it gets better. I think that the fact that the computer images are intangible in a sense, and that you can't reach out and grab one and move it around, just as the moving picture itself is an intangible thing. It doesn't exist unless it's in a projector running, and and the creatures that we're making for this movie are non-existent unless the computer is running. So in a sense it's new and different than what the kind of monster makers who make it out of rubber or make it out of plastic kind of thing. But they're all means to an end. I mean, and basically the means to the end is the image and the effect on the audience, and the fact that it's not something you can pick up and move around in a physical sense is kind of immaterial as far as I'm concerned. In the visual effects area, we're looking for new means to the end. The end being how do we convince the audience that they're seeing something that we want them to think that they're seeing. And the audience is very, very slick. I mean, they see right through you if you're not careful. And that's what we want to guard against, because we have a responsibility to be able to trick the audience successfully. And the audience loves to be tricked. They just don't like to know how they've been tricked. And the moment they can see that, you lose them as an audience, and they're thinking about something other than the story.
In my opinion, the more tricks you throw at the audience, the more you combine them, the less easy it is for them to figure it out.
Mark?
We're trying to blend these as much as we can, because I think that's really the future of special effects, is not necessarily CGI, not state-of-the-art makeup effects, but where you can blend them.
There's a contraption that we used, which was called the optical printer, which is a big, complicated camera projector system with lenses and precision stages to move things around in. And this was the device that we used to composite multiple images into the final shot. This was a real love-hate relationship, and it kind of symbolizes the end of what I call the sumo wrestling era of visual effects, where you have this unwilling technology that you have to basically wrestle to the ground with force and throw it out of the ring before it throws you out. We're now in the digital age, which is a much more, there's more finesse that we can bring to the table.
You on TV, huh? Right there?
One of the reasons I took the film was to really get in and become familiar with the digital technology that I saw was going to change the way movies were made. And of course it has.